There is a kind of woman whose heart is always just a little bit too open. She doesn't fall in love. She dissolves in it, quickly, deeply, and often quietly afraid that she'll be left again. And when she loves, it isn't measured. It's worship. It's devotion. It's bending until her spine aches, until her voice disappears, until she's not even sure if it's love anymore or just fear of being alone. If this feels familiar, then what you're about to hear might not feel like a story at all. It might feel like someone has finally turned a light on in the room you've been sitting in for years, quietly, without blaming you, without fixing you, just being with you long enough to let the ache breathe. Because love, real love, was never supposed to hurt like that. It was never meant to feel like begging, or waiting for scraps, or shrinking every time he pulls away, just so he doesn't disappear completely. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But when it comes to women who love too much, fate isn't always a future. Sometimes it's a loop, a wound, a pattern, passed down through the voices of mothers who didn't get to choose themselves, grandmothers who were told to endure quietly, and girls who were taught that love means staying even when it costs everything. You don't love too much because you're broken. You love too much because someone, somewhere, taught you that loving enough would make them stay. That if you could just be soft enough, patient enough, loyal enough, they'd finally stop leaving. You weren't given love freely, so now you try to earn it. You weren't protected, so now you protect them. You weren't heard, so now you silence yourself just to feel safe. And even though your hands are tired from holding, and your heart is sore from hoping, you still believe that maybe, this time it will be different. But what if it's not about him at all? What if it was never about how much love you give, but how much of yourself you keep? This video is not a solution. It's a mirror. It's a whisper to the woman who's been told she's too sensitive, too emotional, too intense, when all she really wanted was to be chosen with the same fire she offers. So stay with me, even if it's hard, especially if it's hard, because you're about to hear what that inner girl, the one who begged and waited and tried, has been dying to hear her whole life. And if this feels like it was meant for you, it probably was. You can stay anonymous, but you don't have to stay unseen. Tap the heart. Subscribe. Let this be your space too. Take a breath. We begin now. There is a strange silence that follows heartbreak, not the kind after screaming or crying, but the quiet that settles when nothing is said at all. That moment when you realize you've given everything you had, and they still walked away. Or worse, stayed, but never really came closer. She sat across from him at the kitchen table. His coffee was still warm. Her hands were clenched. She had memorized the pause before his answers, the weight of his sighs, the coldness he wore when things got too intimate. And still she stayed. She stayed because she believed in the version of him she saw when he was kind. She stayed because she believed love meant staying. But inside, something was unraveling. Slowly, quietly, like a whisper she had ignored for years, was growing louder. You see, the first sign that you're losing yourself isn't that you stop smiling, it's that you stop asking why you're not. Carl Jung believed that the things we repress don't disappear. They just move underground, into the subconscious, into your choices, into your lovers. So if you ever wondered why you always choose the emotionally unavailable ones, it's because part of you still hopes that if you can get them to stay, then maybe the first one who doesn't count anymore. But your heart is not a courtroom. You don't need to win your case. You need to come home to yourself. She didn't know how to leave him, not because she loved him more than herself, but because she didn't remember what it felt like to choose herself at all. And when you've spent years turning yourself into someone worth keeping, Walking away feels like failure, like wasted time, like the grief of a woman who gave too much without ever being asked to. But what if you weren't meant to be chosen by him? What if you were meant to remember that you are the chooser? Women who love too much are not weak. They are warriors in disguise. Their loyalty is infinite. Their resilience is unmatched. But it comes at a price: exhaustion, silence, and a kind of loneliness that follows you even when you're not alone. You tell yourself it's just a phase. He's just stressed. You're just sensitive. But in your body you already know. You know in the way your stomach sinks when his name lights up your phone. You know in the way you cry more in secret than in joy. You know in the way you perform peace when all you want is permission to scream. Carl Jung wouldn't have told you to leave. He would have asked you to meet the woman inside you who believes pain is proof of love, who still thinks if she hurts enough, he'll finally understand her worth. But it isn't him who needs to understand. It's you. There was a little girl once, maybe 7, maybe 8, who sat at the top of the stairs, listening to voices she didn't understand but felt in her chest like thunder. Every slammed door, every long silence, every strange goodbye that wasn't really a goodbye but felt like the beginning of an ending. She memorized them. She learned to listen for shifts in tone. She learned to anticipate distance. She learned that love leaves quietly and fast. That girl grew up to become a woman who loved with everything she had, and then just a little more, just in case it still wasn't enough. You see, loving too much never starts in the relationship you're in now. It starts in the one you had with safety, with attention, with being seen. And when those things weren't given freely, you decided somewhere deep and wordless that maybe if you could just be better, they'd come back. So you became good. You became understanding. You became everything but angry. You smiled when it hurt. You stayed when you should have walked. You gave when your heart was already empty. But here's something Jung would have whispered to you. The person you're trying to save is the child inside you. Not the man who keeps disappearing. Not the one who comes close only to pull away. Not the one who loves the way you look when you're quiet and obedient, but not the way you shake when you're finally honest. The second sign that you're loving too much isn't how much you give. It's how much of yourself you abandon. There is a part of you maybe long buried that still believes being chosen is the reward. That being needed is the same as being loved. That being everything for someone else will finally make you feel whole. But the truth, you already are. You just forgot. And forgetting is easy when you're told that love is a sacrifice. When you're praised for being low maintenance, cool, calm, chill. When you're applauded for your ability to stay through chaos and hold your man down. No one ever taught you that love can also look like rest, like consistency, like peace. You began to confuse intensity with intimacy, conflicted silence with mystery. The way he looks at you after an argument with connection. But connection doesn't require you to bleed. The women who love too much often know exactly what the other person needs before they even ask. She hears the unspoken, feels the energy shift, offers support even when no one thanks her. But when it comes to her own needs, she flinches, she hides, she rationalizes, she calls herself dramatic or too emotional, or says she's just tired. But you are not dramatic. You are not needy. You are starved for truth, for resonance, for presence. And if you've been told your standards are too high, it's probably because the ones who said it knew they couldn't meet them. It's not your job to make yourself easier to love. It's your job to ask why you keep lowering the bar. The third sign you love too much is the ache that follows silence. Not his silence, yours. The kind you keep swallowing moment after moment. Every time you feel something rise in your chest but say nothing. Every time you want to ask, "Where do we stand?" but instead laugh and change the subject. Every time your instincts scream but your lips stay sealed because you've learned that speaking honestly gets you punished, not loved. You weren't born quiet. You were trained to be. And maybe you didn't notice when it started. Maybe it was after one too many conversations where you were called too much, or when someone told you, "You're just being emotional," or when you finally opened your heart and someone used it like a weapon. But now, silence feels safer. And that's the tragedy. Because when your silence is the only thing keeping the peace, there is no peace. Carl Jung didn't tell women to become louder. He asked them to become whole. And wholeness means reclaiming all the parts of you that you pushed down to stay loved. The fire, the fury, the wisdom, the rage. Yes, rage. You're allowed to be angry, not destructive, not cruel, but honest. You're allowed to feel betrayed when you're the only one carrying the weight. You're allowed to be disappointed when someone stops showing up. You're allowed to say, "This hurts," without explaining why. And if someone walks away because you finally used your voice, let them. They were never staying for you. They were staying for the version of you who didn't speak. The fourth sign that you've lost yourself in love is when your worth becomes negotiable, when your needs feel like burdens, when every argument ends with you apologizing even when you're the one left crying. You start to ask questions like, "Am I asking for too much?" when all you really wanted was consistency. You shrink yourself in rooms where you deserve to shine. You tolerate breadcrumbs and call it compromise. But there's a secret you may not have heard before. Real love doesn't require you to abandon yourself. It doesn't ask you to wait in confusion or twist yourself into someone unrecognizable just to be enough. Real love doesn't hurt like this. You don't have to earn devotion. You don't have to prove your softness. You don't have to beg for the bare minimum. And most of all, you don't have to settle for being understood later by the ones who refuse to understand you now. Women who love too much don't need to stop loving. They need to start choosing better. And that begins when you decide, even with shaking hands and tear-streaked cheeks, that the woman you are becoming is more important than the love you are losing. Let that sink in. There comes a moment, often quiet, almost invisible, when you realize you're not crying over him anymore. You're crying over the years, over the time you lost trying to convince someone that your love was enough, over the birthdays you spent waiting, the texts you reread, trying to decode, the fights you walked on eggshells through, thinking maybe if you said it just right, he'd finally see you. But he didn't, because he was never looking. Not really. And that's the fifth sign. You love too much when you keep trying to heal in the same place that keeps wounding you. Somewhere deep inside, a small voice, the one you've learned to ignore, keeps whispering, "This isn't love. This is survival dressed in romance. This is rescuing in disguise. This is what happens when your worth was never mirrored back to you, so now you try to find it in their eyes. But no amount of pleasing will bring you peace. No amount of chasing will bring them closer. And no amount of hurting will ever make this feel right. There is a girl in you who still believes that if she's patient enough, kind enough, giving enough, she'll finally be enough. But you already are. You always were. You've just been handing your power to people who don't know how to hold it gently. Jung spoke often about shadows, the parts of ourselves we reject. And for women who love too much, one of the biggest shadows is this: the part of you that wants more. The part of you that says, "I don't want to carry both of us." The part of you that longs to rest, that's tired of fixing, that wants to be met, not managed. And when you repress that part long enough, it doesn't disappear. It just turns into depression, into fatigue, into numbness, until one day you wake up next to someone and feel more alone than if you were by yourself. So you get quieter, more accommodating, more agreeable. You perform love, hoping someday it becomes real again. But love shouldn't be a role you play. It should be the place you come home to. The sixth sign you love too much. You've stopped dreaming. Your world shrinks to their moods, their needs, their plans. Your goals are delayed. Your friendships are forgotten. Your body is tense, and your days blur together because your life has become about managing someone else's. And here's the hardest part. No one claps for you. No one sees the effort, the invisible labor, the way you hold everything together without falling apart. You feel invisible, because in many ways you've made yourself invisible to survive. But you deserve to be seen, not just when you're smiling, not just when you're easy, not just when you're useful. Seen fully, wildly, in your joy, in your anger, in your brilliance, in your mess. That's what love should feel like, and anything less is not your burden to carry. She sat in the parked car for over an hour, keys in the ignition, phone in her lap, chest heavy with all the things she couldn't say aloud. He was inside again, scrolling through his own silence, not noticing the time. Or maybe he did notice and just didn't care. This wasn't about one bad day, or even one distant partner. It was the accumulation of too many moments where she swallowed herself just to keep the illusion of love alive. The seventh sign you're loving too much is when your inner world becomes a secret. When your sadness is something you hide not because you want to, but because you've already been made to feel like your pain is inconvenient. When you start telling yourself, maybe I'm just sensitive, over and over again, it's not a reflection of truth. It's a reflection of gaslighting from others, and eventually from yourself. Carl Jung didn't need to define that pain. He knew it by another name: soul loss. Not literal, but spiritual. When your identity becomes so wrapped in someone else that you no longer know what you want, what you like, what lights you up. You become a reflection of their chaos, a background character in your own story. And here's the truth: no one tells the woman who loves too much. It's not your partner that's keeping you stuck. It's your hope. Hope that maybe this next conversation will change something. Hope that if you hold on long enough, they'll see. Hope that your loyalty will one day be rewarded. But if you're being honest, hope has become your prison, because it keeps you future-focused while your present is starving. Hope should not hurt this much. You deserve a love that isn't about convincing, about effort without return, about waiting endlessly in emotional hallways for doors that never open. The eighth sign you've given too much is when you forget your worth in their absence. You feel like half a person when they pull away, like you're failing, like something must be wrong with you. You scan your memory for what you could have done better. You blame yourself for their withdrawal. You shapeshift again just in case. But here's something you were never taught. People who are truly aligned with your soul will not make you feel like love is something you must earn. They will not use silence to punish. They will not create confusion and call it passion. They will not disappear and expect your devotion to remain untouched. And most of all, they will not treat your heart like a thing to be tested. You, dear woman, were not made to be tested. You were made to be honored. But if you were never shown that kind of love growing up, it makes sense that you try to find it in others, even when it hurts, even when it breaks you. It's not weakness. It's a story that needs rewriting. And that story begins with remembering the kind of love you want isn't too much. It's just rare. But you can't find rare if you're busy tolerating scraps. She started to realize it in the smallest ways. The way her body relaxed when he wasn't around. The way she laughed louder with friends. The way her soul felt light when she imagined a life where she didn't have to explain herself over and over again just to be met with a shrug. The ninth sign you love too much is when peace feels unfamiliar, when the absence of tension makes you anxious, when you're so used to being on edge, waiting for the next emotional shift. That calm feels dangerous, foreign, like something you don't deserve. Because you've learned to associate love with anxiety, with highs and lows, with fixing and forgiving and forgetting your own needs, just to keep the relationship from crumbling. But that's not love. That's survival dressed in sacrifice. Jung once reflected that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. And for many women, loving too much is inherited, not by genetics, but by modeling. You watched your mother give until she had nothing left. You heard her quiet sobs behind closed doors. You saw her stay, even when it hurt. And you thought, this is what women do. So you became the caretaker, the overfunctioner, the one who holds the emotional weight for two people, the one who calls and waits and apologizes first, the one who bends, but no one ever asked what happens when she breaks. And maybe you did break quietly, invisibly, over and over again. Every time your needs were dismissed, every time your vulnerability was used against you, every time you were met with indifference where there should have been softness. So let me tell you something no one told you. There is nothing noble about abandoning yourself. There is no badge for staying longer than you should. No reward for carrying a love that was never meant to be yours. No prize at the end for proving your worth to someone who refuses to see it. The 10th sign you love too much is when you stop recognizing the woman in the mirror. Her eyes are still kind, but they're tired. Her smile is practiced. Her posture is smaller. She's careful now. She doubts herself before she speaks. She dresses for his gaze, not her own joy. She performs confidence, but goes to sleep with questions. And those questions are the beginning of your healing, because they mean your soul is waking up, asking for more, asking to be remembered, asking, is this all there is? The answer is no. There is more, so much more. But first, you must choose to stop proving yourself to someone who benefits from your silence. You must decide that love should feel like home, not like a test. And that begins with the smallest word that carries the most power. Enough. Enough begging, enough waiting, enough explaining, enough hoping, enough staying small. You are not here to fix broken men. You are here to heal the broken patterns that made you think that was your purpose. There is a grief that comes with waking up not because you've lost them, but because you found yourself again. She sat alone one night, lights dim, heart sore but not shattered. And for the first time in years, she didn't reach for her phone. She didn't wait for his name to flash across the screen. She didn't rehearse another apology she didn't owe. Instead, she whispered something almost too quiet to hear. I miss who I was before I tried so hard to be loved. And in that whisper, something cracked open. The 11th sign you love too much is when your love becomes a strategy, a negotiation, a series of compromises where you trade little pieces of yourself for glimpses of affection. And you tell yourself it's worth it, because when he's good, he's really good. But love that feels like gambling is not love. It's a wound, playing out in real time. You were taught that love must be earned, so you perform. You become softer when you're angry. You become quieter when you're confused. You ignore red flags, call them challenges. You dim your light so he doesn't feel small, and still, it's never enough. But that's not your fault. That's the design. Because people who only love you when you're easy aren't loving you. They're managing you. And you've made yourself manageable to avoid being abandoned. But that little girl who learned to stay quiet so she wouldn't be left, she deserves more than silence in return. Jung spoke of individuation becoming whole by reclaiming the lost parts of yourself. And for women who love too much, The journey isn't about learning how to love less. It's about learning how to love yourself first before anyone else gets a say. It's about asking, what would it mean to be in a relationship where I don't have to disappear to be desired? Because desire that requires you to disappear is not desire, it's domination. And you were not born to be consumed. You were born to be cherished. The 12th sign you've crossed the line is when you fear your own truth more than his reaction. You tiptoe, you filter, you say it nicely so he won't leave. And even when he does something that breaks your spirit, you cushion your honesty with softness. You say, I understand you've been through a lot, instead of, you hurt me, but your pain matters. Not because it makes you weak, but because it makes you real. And real love holds space for both people to exist, not just one. You cannot heal by going numb. You cannot grow by staying small. You cannot be loved truly by someone who only sees you when you're pleasing them. So tonight, if you're listening with a heart that feels like it's been cracked open more times than you can count, let this be the beginning of your return. Not to him, not to the idea of him, but to yourself, because you've never been too much. You've just been giving too much to someone who never knew what to do with a woman like you. She stood at the edge of the door, hand on the knob, heart trembling. Not because she was afraid of leaving him, but because she was finally brave enough to face what staying had cost her. And in that final breath before goodbye, she didn't feel rage, or regret, or even grief. She felt something far more sacred, relief. The 13th sign that you've loved too much is when leaving feels like coming home. Not the kind of leaving that's fueled by drama or bitterness or threats, but the quiet kind, the still kind, the kind that doesn't need to explain itself because it finally understands. She didn't need him to chase her. She didn't need closure. She didn't even need an apology. What she needed, what she always needed, was herself, her own presence, her own validation, her own love. And this is where things shift, because healing doesn't begin the moment he changes. It begins the moment you stop waiting. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." And this awakening, this beautiful, terrifying unraveling, is the moment you realize that your love is a gift, not a negotiation. That you never had to earn what should have been given freely. That being chosen is not the highest form of love choosing yourself is. But let's be honest, it hurts. It hurts to walk away, to let go of the idea, to release the fantasy, to say goodbye to the version of you that tried so hard to make it work. It hurts because you're grieving two things: the relationship and the woman you had to become to survive it. You will miss the comfort of familiarity. Even if it was painful, you will ache for his voice. Even if it always left you unsure, you will second guess, replay, wonder. But underneath all that doubt lives a deeper knowing. You didn't lose love. You left what was never real. Because real love does not ask you to prove your worth. It mirrors it back to you. It doesn't punish you for being emotional. It honors your depth. It doesn't demand that you shrink. It makes room for all of you, not just the parts that are convenient. So if you're sitting in your own stillness tonight, heart bruised, unsure, craving something more but terrified of what that means, you're not alone. This is the sacred space between who you were and who you're becoming. It is lonely and raw and breathtaking, but it is yours. The 14th and final sign that your healing has begun is this: you no longer chase what hurt you. You no longer beg for what you once thought was love. You no longer confuse longing with destiny. You begin to walk not away from him, but toward yourself. And that woman, the one with the tired eyes and the steady breath and the quiet strength, she is the one you've been waiting for. She is the ending. She is the beginning.